Welcome back to the Means Report. Our special guest today is 10th District Congressman Jody Hice, talking about all of the things that are happening in Washington, D.C. And Congressman, you mentioned that this tax reform package that the House just passed includes a provision that impacts the Affordable Care Act, that we could have tax reform and health care reform all in one. Does this make the Affordable Care Act as we know it go away? What happens there?
Well, that part of the bill is in the Senate version of tax reform, not in the House. So the tax reform bill we sent does not have that feature. So that's in the Senate
version.
They will have to pass it and then go to conference. But I do believe if it goes to conference, that will certainly pass in the House. One of the biggest complaints we hear from constituents is they can't afford the Affordable Care Act, so-called, and if they don't pay for it, they're penalized. And so doing away with the individual mandate, this is the first time in American history, Brad, that our federal government has forced people to buy something in the individual private market that they don't want to have. And it doesn't give them the options that they want to have.
What do you say, though, to someone who says, please don't make that go away? It's how I get my coverage.
It's a disaster. Look, I don't know that there's anyone that cannot testify personally of how their insurance premiums have gone up, their deductibles have gone up, and the quality of service and the doctors available have gone down. We in the 10th District now have 16 out of our 25 counties who only have one provider in the county. That's unacceptable. This is not America free market, and so this is something that has to be fixed. I guess the issue comes down to an argument between the philosophy that government is the answer to everything versus private sector and free enterprise is a solution. And I certainly believe that free enterprise offers much better solutions than government.
Let's talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault. This has also dominated the headlines lately. We know that it's being discussed in Washington, D.C. Allegations are being leveled daily, it seems like, for members of both parties about incidents that have allegedly occurred. What can be done legislatively or just even generally to prevent or at least address these sexual harassment issues?
Well, I can tell you in our office, both, and this involves everyone, myself included, both in D.C. and in the 3 offices in the 10th District, we've required everyone to go through sexual harassment training, and I think that will be helpful. We just want to make sure people understand the lines and that we're not crossing any lines, period. But yeah, it is stunning what's happening in our country right now, from Hollywood to politics. Everything you mentioned right now, it's amazing some of the things that are taking place. I feel very confident there will be some legislation to tighten up on some of this. Yeah, I just found out this week there's some sort of fund in D.C. to help pay off people who have filed sexual harassment claims, and they pay these folks off in behalf of whatever representative or whoever supposedly committed the issue. I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Does it make you, let me just ask this more generally, does it make lawmakers fearful that someone may come out of the woodwork and say something that could forever damage their reputation? I'm not trying to diminish the claims that are out there whatsoever, but I just wonder, because there are so many of them, are lawmakers kind of paranoid or fearful that it might hit them?
Yeah, I certainly can't speak for everyone. I know I'm as cautious as I can possibly be.
Sure, you have to be.
I don't even want to get on an elevator with just another single individual anymore. I mean, so you do have to take precautions, and but you do what you have to do.
Well, you're right, and it brings back a memory. I once had a general manager in the television business who was sitting next to a woman at a group meeting at a restaurant, and he moved his seat so he would not be seen sitting next to her, because that's how careful he was trying to be. But you're right, you have to always make sure that you're beyond reproach. Let me ask you about the tax-exempt status that nonprofits enjoy, especially churches, as I ask you to put on your Pastor Jody Hice hat instead of Congressman Jody Hice, or both. You have pushed a measure to get the IRS to lay off. They have always been able to threaten to take away your tax-exempt status if you talk about politics from the pulpit. How's that going?
It's going great. The repeal if you want to call it the repeal of that, what you refer to as the Johnson Amendment,
Johnson Amendment,
a code that was placed in the IRS code in 1954. Whip Steve Scalise and myself presented a bill called the Free Speech Fairness Act, and that language was placed in the tax bill, and I'm thrilled about it. It protects the rights of pastors, nonprofits, houses of worship from a de minimis expense, which means it's just about the regular course of what they always do. This does not allow churches to become political action committees, but just in the regular course of what they're doing, if there's a candidate who agrees with the position of that organization, they're able to say something about it without fear of harassment or punishment.
Well, I was going to ask you, does it allow the preacher to say, "Good Sunday morning, everybody, please vote for Jody Hice"?
It probably could if Jody Hice is a candidate that church supports and there's reason and so forth. Yeah, and that would that kind of thing. But it would not allow a church, for example, to go out and run a full-page ad in USA Today if they are not customarily in process of doing that. This is just in the regular business of what they typically do. They can address certain things without fear.
Have you gotten any pushback from people who say, no, we must keep those things separated?
You always get some pushback, but listen, this is an issue I've been involved in for years and years. I was a group of the original 33 pastors that challenged the IRS. Listen, the heart of our First Amendment is not only political but religious speech, to be able to express your beliefs in the public square. And where is religious speech if it's not in a church? Mm-hmm. And the core of that is in the pulpit. The last thing we need is our government, and this is what's been happening, our government policing and literally censoring what can and cannot be said from the pulpits of America. And that is not separation like we hear about so often.
Let's talk about a bill that you authored, the Presidential Allowance Modernization Act. What it does is, or what it could mean, is less money for ex-presidents. Why?
Ex-presidents get a pension, a personal pension, about $200,000 a year, plus they get $500,000 a year for their staff and this, that, and the other, and then they have security measures and all that, and that's good and fine. None of that goes away unless a former president, which now they all do, have book deals, speaking engagements, this, that, and this. The Obamas just signed a $65 million book deal.
Yep.
George Bush had like a $10 million book deal.
They don't need the 100,000.
They don't need a couple 100,000, and so our bill basically says, why should the American taxpayer be on the hook to pay for some of these expenses when these individuals are making millions of dollars? So anything over $400,000 that a former president would now make, anything over $400,000, dollar for dollar after that would start decreasing some of the expenses and save the taxpayers a lot of money.
What are you doing for our veterans? What should they know about your work on Capitol Hill?
Veterans have a very special place in my heart. I don't believe any group deserves a red carpet treatment more than our veterans and those who have laid their lives on the line for all of us. I would tell our veterans, if they're having issues with the VA or any of these issues, to contact our office or whoever their representative is. That is the #1 top group of people that we serve and help. But we've been able to pass 44 pro-veteran bills in the House of Representatives this year. 6, I believe, of those have actually passed the Senate, helping on a variety of issues, from educational issues to extending and expanding GI benefits to health issues across the board, just a number of different things, and it's a top priority for us.
Since we've last met, sadly, we have had mass shootings, most notably, at least from a numbers standpoint, if you will, the one in Las Vegas that claimed dozens of lives. I had a political scientist on here one time who said, this is the new normal. These shootings are going to happen. And he was right. My question is, legislatively, can anything be done either from a gun control standpoint or a mental health standpoint to address this?
You know, Brad, to be very honest with you, to me what that is a reflection of is a spiritual problem more than a legislative problem. We have people who are forsaking the true understanding of right and wrong and morality and proper treatment of one another, and we are seeing that more and more as we forsake our Christian principles that we were established on. That being said, you know, there's only so much that legislation can do to stop someone who has evil intent. I mean, by definition, a criminal is someone who does not abide by the law. It's what makes them a criminal. And so we can pass more laws and this, that, and the other, but to be honest, none of those laws have prevented any of these vicious, vile people from doing what they've done to this point. And, you know, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that can be done. I'm a strong believer, as you know, in the Second Amendment, and for people to be able to defend themselves. And I think in many instances, had people had the ability to defend themselves, a lot less of this would have, it would be a lot less in the bottom line in terms of the mass murders.
My last question, probably 30 seconds. Are you hopeful for the future? If we meet again in 6 months or a year, is America going to be on the right track?
We're on the right track. You know, look, already in 10 months, we're seeing 1.5 million more jobs that have been added to the private sector. The GDP is going up, fewer people entering the country illegally, stock markets hitting records week after week after week. So yeah, we're on the right track. We just got to get the Senate in gear, and we're going to see some good things happen.
Well, we will continue to keep an eye on them and all things political. Congressman Hice, thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.